So we're ATech, and basically what we do and what we're going to do is bring complete transparency, accountability, and efficiency to the international aid and development sector. The reason we wanted to do this was we see all the illicit flows happening out of countries and the corruption and the lack of transparency in governance. And my background, I worked as a computer scientist, I'm a software engineer, and I really believe technology can empower people and can change the way people do things quicker than governments can. Apologies if I offend anybody saying that. And with this, I'd always worked in the banking sector. And in 2009, I ran a race in the Sahara Desert called the Marathon des Sables. I raised a lot of cash for a charity, and my main donor asked me about 9 months later on, Joseph, where has that money gone? I went back to my aid organization, and I said, where's that money gone? And the money was raised for facial reconstruction for children, but the money was used to build a school, which is fine, but it wasn't what we had planned. So that always bugged me personally, that we could never trace where international aid goes and what it was used for. And with that, it made me think about how can aid delivery become more efficient? How can it become more transparent? And that was between 2009 and 2010. And then I came across this new fantastic thing called blockchain technology. I didn't really understand it at the start, but when I found out more about it, I found that it was this public ledger where every time a transaction happens, it happens in real time, and it's distributed to every computer on the network. So you can't falsify transactions, you can't have double spend, you can't have the same thing happening twice. So with my experience in the banking sector and with my experience of raising a lot of cash for charity events, it kind of brought to the attention to me that we could actually try to solve a real problem here. Now initially it was started to look at aid delivery, but then it grew into something much bigger after I spoke with a lot of NGOs and a lot of people working in the sector, because I didn't have that experience. And then when I looked at how aid delivery works, I saw the amount of inefficiencies. It was quite incredible, it was quite shocking to me, that on average between 25 to 30% of funds can go missing through corruption, but it's not just money going missing, it's the inefficiencies of getting products or life-saving products to the right people at the right time. Now, if there was a way to combine blockchain technology and the delivery of aid together to the right person at the right time, that gives governments and NGOs complete control of where their funds are being distributed. And secondly to that, donors can see actually where their money is being spent, individual or corporate donors. And that was really the vision that set it all off. So what I did was I got together a team, ex-Microsoft engineer, and I said, I want to build something incredible here I want to affect millions of people in the world. And his question was, why don't you go after the finance sector? You can make more money and it's quicker. And I said, absolutely not, I'm getting away from that sector. So with that, we thought the biggest impact could happen was in the humanitarian sector. So this is where we came to blockchain technology. So if we go back to the story, when I ran the Marathon des Sables, my main donor who asked me where that money went in 2009, I went back to him in 2014 and said, I think I've solved the problem from a couple of years ago. Can you help me? He could say, what do you recommend? I said, if you give me money, I'll bring it to a charity, and then we will distribute that charity in an area that doesn't really have good electricity and so on, and see if we can trace every cent of that donation in real time. So he said no, and then I asked him again and again. He goes, get me a reputable partner. I said, okay. So we went to the Irish Red Cross. We said, listen, I've got you 50,000 euros. And they're like, okay. I said, but you need to do a project with me. So they said, fine. I said, we don't take any money from it. We just want to test something here in real time. So we set up a project in Lebanon. And there was some logistics and money. Someone went to logistics, and that was fine. So essentially what we did was we went to a community in Tripoli, North Lebanon, who had traveled from Syria, and they were in the Akkar refugee camp just on the border with Syria and Lebanon, but they had moved into Tripoli because they heard they could get more money and funding and so on and more aid from aid organizations there. But a lot of people who had moved to Tripoli from the Akkar refugee camp had actually been cut off from funding. So we got 1,500 of the most vulnerable people that we could find, and the Red Cross, the Irish Red Cross, were fantastic, and they set this up. And what we essentially did was we created them an all-in identity and based it on blockchain technology. So their identity on the blockchain could only work at predefined places that their identity could be accepted. Once we had their ID taken and put it onto the blockchain, we then had individual entitlements linked to this ID. And we simply handed them out, not in the form of, it could have been a mobile phone, but we wanted to take a step backwards. We wanted to engineer it in such a way that it could work even if electricity was down. And you can probably see these vouchers here. So these vouchers here had a QR code on them. And the QR code on them basically had the identification and the personalized entitlements. So the refugees basically went into participating stores to show this piece of simple plastic. It was scanned by the shopkeeper, and the transaction took about 3 seconds. When that transaction was confirmed, it was sent to the blockchain. It was there forever to see. It worked absolutely perfectly. Within 2 hours, we got 44 fake vouchers in. I don't know how it happened. I even asked the guy who was caught, I asked him, how did he do it? I said, I'd pay him if he told me how he did it. And I didn't get an answer. But it was perfect. It was perfect verification to see that you can eliminate fraud, you can have complete transparency, but you have instant reconciliation on the back end for the financial settlement of cash. So from the Red Cross actually paying to the shopkeeper. And it worked absolutely perfectly. We believe this to be the first delivery of international aid in the blockchain. And that has opened up so many doors for us with larger aid organisations and governments. Okay, so the first project, as I say, was in Lebanon, and we partnered with the Irish Red Cross. Since we partnered with the Irish Red Cross, we've actually flown to Geneva, and we've had detailed discussions, and we've given workshops to the Federation of the Red Cross, and they're absolutely blown away by it. The reason they're blown away by it is it can do a number of things for them. It gives them complete transparency, and it gives them an opportunity to get more funding from governments because they can show where the money is being spent. But it gives them an opportunity to get more funding from corporates. So if they can show corporates where the money is being spent and how it's being distributed to improve people's lives at a very minimum cost, then these big corporates can do reporting and analytics to show their shareholders where the money is being spent. We've met with 2 under general secretaries of the Red Cross recently over the last 2 weeks, and we've agreed to run projects for food security in South Africa, and we're looking between 20 and 30,000 people there, so hopefully it'll be the biggest type of aid distribution on the blockchain. I can say ever because it's only 6 years old. And then we're looking at running a project in Haiti. That will be with the ex-president of Haiti, and he's helping us to understand that money can go missing in Haiti. So it's more of a remittance project there. But if it's remittances or if it's aid distribution, it doesn't really matter because the technology is still simple and cheap, and it's there for everybody to use. We have just recently returned from Calais. Excuse me, and if Calais is probably most in the news these days, unfortunately, for the refugee camp there, known as Le Jungle. So we went down there 3 weeks ago, and we spent a day touring the camp, and horrendous conditions, to be honest. It was absolutely awful. But we spent a day looking around the camp, seeing what the problems are, and if anyway these people's lives who were living there in no man's land can be improved. So if anybody's ever been to Calais, you see in the camp you have metal containers, and they're like the Manhattan apartments that you live in. That's the best of the best. But outside, it's a Van Diemen's Land. It's just made up camps where people just kind of survive by themselves. They don't get any funding. But within the actual camp itself, what they do is they distribute vouchers, paper vouchers, and has a picture of the actual recipient on the paper voucher. And then it has little boxes for the amount of food vouchers they're due every day and the amount of showers that they're allowed in a week. And it's very undignified that people have to queue up 2 or 3 hours a day, 2 to 3 times a day to receive their meal. So as we toured this camp, I could just see the inefficiencies in the process that would make the guys, La Vie Active, who are running the camp, make their jobs a lot easier. So we're looking to roll out a small project there with 1,000 teenage boys. And that's basically, as they queue up, as you can imagine, teenage guys in a camp, very warm weather, agitated, testosterone and so on. So it's trying to improve the efficiencies and actually scale back the fighting that may happen there. And we're looking to roll out in the next few weeks, hoping to just get the go-ahead, which it's really interesting there because if you think about the example in Lebanon, the first part of the process is giving people an ID. And then on that ID, as a person moves, say, from Syria and they travel all the way to Germany, instead of registering at every point of every border or having all this documentation or having no documentation, and essentially an ID based on the blockchain travels from wherever they go. So if they have an ID and they have individual entitlements, and it's not entitlements such as distribution of aid, it's entitlements such as education or visits to a hospital or social welfare payments. For a person who is unbanked, the blockchain allows them to have a credit profile. So just the way the internet democratized information in the 90s, I look at this as financial democratization. So for the people who don't have access to banking facilities, they now have access to absolutely everything by using something very simple called the blockchain. And as Joe alluded to earlier on, I can't do this myself, so we partner with these big aid organizations. And with that, so partnering with the Red Cross Federation and partnering with UNDP, we're looking at doing a project in the Middle East and in Serbia, and everything's going to be based on the distribution of aid and blockchain technology. So instantly you have your efficiencies are improved, and transparency is improved, and governance is improved automatically, because as a room full of engineers, I'd be happy to hear this, you can't defraud mathematics, and that's the beautiful thing about the blockchain. So one of the most important things that I believe personally is to give people a digital identity. If you don't have an identification, anywhere you go, you're always going to be fighting the same battles over and over and over again. By having this digital identity, it entitles you to absolutely so many opportunities. The European Commission run a competition every year called the Social Innovation Awards. And this year the theme is called Integrated Futures. So we went in for this competition and we're down to the final 13, hopefully now this is the final 10. And the reason that the European Commission are looking at blockchain technology to solve some of these problems is because it integrates people into a society a lot quicker than what's already out there. Because as a person between borders, they have to kind of defend and start up and go through the whole process again. So it's not just distribution of aid that you can do on blockchain technology. We were actually speaking with the German Red Cross, who are based in Bangladesh, and it's to do with climate change. So as floods happen, as disasters such as El Nino attack countries, the best way to get ahead is to be proactive, that you know what's coming. So is there any way that we can distribute aid or distribute cash or benefit in kind? So the answer is yes, that can be done, but the problem is if you distribute aid to a group of people in an area and then that disaster does not happen or the hurricane switches course at the last minute, all that aid is being distributed and it can't be retrieved back. Well, it actually can now. Okay, so there's a thing called forecast-based financing, where essentially what you do is you create a small instrument called a smart contract based on blockchain technology. So if you can imagine, if everybody here is in a local village hall and we know there's a hurricane outside and everybody's being distributed vouchers or credits to their mobile phone, that will only be activated as soon as X amount of water falls. Okay, so as a government or as an aid organization, you have complete control, and all you need to do is press one button and that distributes the aid or the cash equivalent to everybody's entitlements. So if that doesn't happen, or if it does happen, you can even revoke those transactions on the blockchain by using a permissioned ledger, and that connects to the public blockchain. Getting very technical, I won't go into it in too much detail. So the idea of it is that you create a smart contract that knows when to pay people out. And then that can trigger a response. If, yes, I can use this now to buy products, or no, I can't use this until a certain alert or a certain trigger is flagged. So for an example, as we're talking about this is looking at in Bangladesh or possibly Peru in December, because we know floods are going to happen, we know the disaster is going to happen, but when it's a question of timing. And you don't give people to distribute aid too much too quickly, because they may spend it and they may need to come back more for more. So an example of this is when the aid is distributed, it doesn't have to be cash. So using blockchain, you can create assets, and assets can represent anything. So an asset could be a bottle of water, it could be for a pregnant woman traveling from Syria, it could be baby formula, it could be absolutely anything. So you create a certain amount of assets and you distribute those assets. So for the first time ever, aid organizations and government have complete traceability and transparency of everything they distribute, because they manage the process of what they distribute. So it's a digital IOU or digital representation of whatever product it may be. So the project actually we're looking with for refugees coming from Lebanon into Europe, you're customizing the aid experience just the way we would have a customized experience for buying something online. It gives the person dignity of what they want to use. And so going forward, what do I see or what do we see the future as? So we're working with the Red Cross, and we're working with UNDP, and we're actually working with Ireland's largest aid organisation, Concern.net. And Concern.net are connected in with NetHope in the USA. And what we want to say is, how can you customize the experience on a number of different levels? 1 for the beneficiary, 2 for the donor, and 3 for the aid organisation. So we've covered the digital identity. The next part is customized aid. So we've actually developed an app that you can, haven't released it yet, but you can download it onto your phone, and you can top it up with, say, £10 or €10 worth of credit. And on that, you can make a donation, or you can buy products, say 4 bottles of water, 6 bags of rice, and you can make that donation directly yourself to a list of NGOs that may be in the app. Once you confirm that transaction, you get a transaction ID that you know when it's being delivered. So it completely changes the game of how aid distribution is done, but also how aid donations are done. And something that's really, really interesting is we're speaking with a large insurance company, and actually in the Red Cross have up to 70 million volunteers, and they need to insure up to 6 million of those volunteers. They have a fund to do this. But the biggest problem that they have is retrieving documents or insurance policies. How can you do that in real time, and so on. Basically, we've created something that says if a farmer wants to take a picture of a cow or land, he can take that picture. That picture can be sent to a list of insurance companies. An insurance company quote comes back, and very cheaply take out the insurance. That insurance policy is then saved on the blockchain, which is attached to that person. And for the Red Cross, the aid organisation, they now have a way to retrieve insurance policies instantly for the staff or the people that they have insured on the ground. So that's not there yet, that's in the future, but it's just an example of how you may hear negative things about the blockchain, but how it can be used for social impact to literally affect millions of people's lives without using this big, old banking infrastructure. So for example, the project in Lebanon, there was no expensive infrastructure. There was a $60 mobile phone. There was a $20 Raspberry Pi machine, if you ever see those, and that backed up all the transactions in real time. So in the space of 3 hours, an NGO can set up its own banking system to deal with a disaster on the ground, where they're in complete control. So there's no corruption, they have complete transparency, and there's complete governance of how funds are distributed. And so I'll leave it at that because I could go on all day. Thank you.